Meat and milk. Why is it forbidden to mix them? I want to review 4 reasons that are offered for this. I find the latter 2 a little bit more, I connect to them a little bit more, but I'm going to present all 4 of them. First one is what you mentioned, that the Torah says you can't cook a kid in its mother's milk. That's the language of the Torah. And so if you're eating an animal, it could be a kid, it could not be a kid. The Torah used the language of a kid just because that's what people did. But if you're eating an animal that was cooked in milk or its mother's milk, that's something that's not a nice thing to do. And we don't want you to engender those kind of character traits to be kind of a not soft and gentle person. So the thing is, the problem with this explanation is that not all milk that you drink is its mother's milk, right? So that's the problem with that. So the Ebenezer goes out of his way, says, well, sometimes when you go buy milk, we don't milk our animals today. So when you go buy milk, maybe that milk that you go buy might actually be the same milk that from its mother. And because in that time it wasn't like these big factories. They just went to the market. She said, we don't want you to get that mixed up because the Torah says it's forbidden. We should stay away from that. This idea is to engender good traits. That's one explanation. The other explanation is Maimonides' explanation, where he says this is what people used to do in that time. They used to cook animals in their mother's milk and bring them to their idols. That's something they used to do. And Abarbanel in the 15th century, he did some research on this. And he found that there were idol-worshipping tribes that did this around their holiday time. They thought that this was a delicacy to eat the animal in their mother's milk. And so we want to stay far away from that. And that's why the Torah actually brings the language of don't cook a kid in its mother's milk around the 3 festivals. It says, three times a year you should come up to Jerusalem to see God. And it says don't cook a kid in its mother's milk. Why? When you have your festivals, don't do what the other pagans are doing. So it's kind of keep us away from it. So we don't cook it, we don't eat it, we stay far away from that. Those are 2 explanations. The problem connecting with, it's a little bit difficult to connect with this one because it's not so prevalent today. At least I don't see it that often, and so it's a little bit harder for me to connect to that explanation. 2 more modern explanations. Rabbi Kook has an interesting one where we mentioned him when I presented my vegan manifesto here. So I'll bring him back. But it won't be in my name, so if anybody's upset, you can get upset at him. But so he said that it's not a secret that Rabbi Kook was uncomfortable with meat consumption. He said that today we eat meat because our bodies aren't as strong as they used to be, or because we have all kinds of lusts and drive. But he said ideally we should be back in the Edenic state where people didn't used to eat meat. And he said also milk. There's some problems with drinking milk too. He says if you're helping the cow and you're relieving the cow of the milk, that's one thing. But if it's just kind of for our consumption, we're not supposed to be suckling off the cow. It's supposed to be they have their babies, they have their lives, and that's what it's meant for. So he said, okay, so we allow you to eat meat, we allow you to drink milk. Ideally, you shouldn't be, but if you put them both together, that's where we draw the line. That's too much. That's what he says, and that's supposed to remind us of that even though the Torah allowed us today to do these things, still, if we do them together, that's too much, and that's enough of a reminder to like keep us focused on what the greater vision is. That's it. And here's one I think that the only problem with that is connecting to that is that there's only one person who in this room who goes by that stuff, me. So if you're trying to look for a reason to connect to when you think about meat and milk, I'm like probably the only vegan here. I don't know. So or maybe not. Okay, cool. Okay, okay. So I'm the only uncloseted vegan here. Okay. So last reason is, and this is I like this reason. This is Dennis Prager. Heard of him? Yeah. So he's about to put out a book on the Bible. He says his monumental work of his lifetime. And so he's about to put out a whole commentary on the Bible. He has some really interesting explanations. So his explanation is it's very simple. You don't have to go like the Ebenezer where it's cool to cook it, then you're eating it, then it might get mixed into milk with someone. You don't have to go that far. It's very direct. It says meat represents death. An animal dies. You have its meat. Milk represents life. An animal gives life to its to its kid through the milk. He says, Judaism is big on life. And it puts the emphasis more on life than on death. And he says he has a whole article on this. He talks about how Egyptian culture was focused on, Egyptian civilization was steeped in death. Its Bible was the book of the dead. And its greatest monuments, its very symbols, the pyramids, were gigantic tombs. And so he has this whole piece here on the fact that Judaism was trying to separate themselves from that and to say that our focus is on life. And we have, he says, for instance, he says he's never seen a religion. Here he says there, the Torah also banned Jewish priests from coming into contact with corpses. He says, I know of no other religious system that banned its holiest members from any contact with the dead. So again, it's the idea that we're kind of trying to separate from life. And that's why we don't connect meat and milk to remind us we want to separate between life and death. I think one message for us could be that we have our loved ones who pass, and we feel we feel the immense pain of their passing, and it's important to experience that. Judaism has beautiful laws of Shiva and Shloshim, 30 days in the year. It's really important to go through that whole process. But while we're going through that, it's also really important to remember, try to focus on what we can also bring from their lives into our lives and to continue their lives. Because there's a continuation also in the next world, but also in this world. We're still here. And we have to try to figure out what to take from our loved ones' lives and try to apply it in our lives. So we will be kind of transitioning from the death to the life, and kind of keeping our focus all the while on life.